Okay, so here, so the idea of this other lecture is more on the how to handle the data collected by the flocks in this case, and how to use the data processing GUI. So feel free to also interrupt me anytime if you have any question. Now you should be able to see the screen. And so, as I was saying, the data processing GUI is based on R, and what we are providing is this long script to the customer, and basically contain all the function to process the data. If you run the script, you can visualize this slots graphical user interface. This is still a sort of beta version, so I'm trying here for the first time in a live demonstration. Let's hope it's not freezing at one point, but in principle it's divided into three main pages. So the data processing, the data filtering, and the data aggregation page. And with that, you can be able to get the data, to process the data, convert it into radiance, calculate fluorescence, reflectance, radiance, vegetation indices, and then also filter the data and make the aggregation of the data. As I was saying, the data are collected usually in a continuous mode, so they can have a different time interval. And if you want to compare, for example, with CO2 fluxes, which is a common application, people needs them to have at a different predefined time interval, like 30 minutes. So this is also something that could be useful for the user. Wanted to show you first the data structure of the flocks. This is, for example, all the data collected by the flocks in Svalbard in 2020, and you can see that you have many folders named with the timestamp, with the date of the data collection. If you then enter, I was preparing some subset, otherwise it's taking too much. For example, this was the same day I was showing you before, the Clear Sky Day. And in this case, you can have several files. The one which start with F refers to the full range spectrometers, while the other one to the raw data of the fluo range spectrometer. If we open one of these, you can see that the structure of the file. So you have first a line containing the header with the number of cycle, the date, the timestamp. This is the internal clock of the flocks. If it was operated in automatic mode or in manual mode, which is also an option. Then the integration time, which is useful, is mandatory, let's say, to later on convert the raw data into radians. Then other information like the duration of the cycle, all the temperature sensor inside the instrument, inside the spectrometer, and also the humidity of some of the compartment of the instrument. Plus, you can have, for example, the GPS time collected by the GPS unit, the date, and the coordinates of the location. Then, after this line, you have the real spectra, which are collected by the instrument. So you have as first the white reference, which means the upward looking channel. So is in raw data, so in digital counts, the incoming radiance. Then the vegetation channel, you can see the shape is different. And then a second white reference. This second white reference is really useful for data filtering approach afterward, because you can always track if the illumination condition collected by during the measurement was stable, or if there were some illumination changes which can affect the measurement. And finally, we are always collecting for every cycle also the dark current, which means the noise, the internal noise of the instrument, which can affect the radiance and the accuracy of the estimate of the reflectance, radiance, fluorescence, and vegetation indices. As you see, this shape is I don't know how familiar you are with radiance, but this is not the common radiance shape of the sun, because the spectrometer itself, the detector, has a different sensitivity to the different wavelength. So you really need to apply calibration coefficient to convert this digital count into radiance. And this is a process we do in the lab. It's generally something that can be done in a lab if you have a known lamp source with a known emission shape, and then basically you are able to determine the calibration coefficient to convert this raw count into radiance. And this was the data from the full range spectrometer for the fluorine spectrometer, whilst for the full range one, you can see the shape is different. And this is because the range is wider. Also, this absorption feature that you can see, this feature in the gray line, are less deep because the spectral resolution is different. So the one with the higher resolution is discriminating better these absorption features. And so what we need for the data processing is first the path where the data is stored, and second, the calibration file. And also what is also needed is the index file, which is a TXT file containing the name, the formula, the band position of the vegetation indices, which can be applied on reflectance or reflected radiance, incoming radiance, and so on. So basically here, everyone can specify the vegetation indices who wants to calculate, and just give this file into the processing chain. So if, for example, we specify here the example SIOS, here we can specify the data folder. I'm just selecting this one with today because it can take a while, a few minutes, but still for the purpose of the presentation is maybe too much. So, and here we specify the calibration file and the index file. Then we can define what kind of time to be used for the processing. Since the flocks contain also the GPS, this is usually better. The clock, so the internal clock of the flocks is mainly used if the data are collected in a place where the GPS is not receiving enough signal, so it's not accurate enough. So you can use the clock. And this is giving you, if you use the GPS, it is giving you also the data output with UTC time, which is usually better for them comparing with other instruments. Then there are some specific correction that could be applied to the data, like nonlinearity correction. This is something related to the spectrometer itself, or the spectrometer, the spectral shift correction for the full spectrometer, because we found that in some cases the fluctuation of temperature could affect the positioning, the proper positioning of the wavelength vector. So this can be automatically corrected in the post-processing. And then you can select, in this case, the retrieval method. I'm not selecting anything now because the standard one, so the IFLD method is already implemented. And then you can also select the data you want to save, like radiance, which means incoming and reflected radiance, and reflectance. And in this case, I can launch the processing, and it can take a while, depends on the data you ingest. In this case, consider that since the instrument was running for many hours, because in Svalbard it was turning on really early in the morning and switching off at late evening. We have approximately 1,400 measurements per day in this case. So here is still processing, but this is something I was already processing yesterday. And as the output, what you can get is the conversion of the raw data into incoming radiance, reflectance, and reflected radiance. If we are opening, for example, the incoming radiance of the full range spectrometer, this is the second file because the instrument is creating a new file after 1000 cycle in order not to have a too much big file. Here we have the first column, which is the wavelength vector, and the timestamp of the data acquisition. So in this case is 5 UTC in the afternoon, and this is the incoming radiance spectrum. I can zoom in. 0.3, so it's more visible. Here you can see the atmospheric feature. For example, this is the oxygen A band. This is water vapor bands. This is another oxygen band, the oxygen B band. And these are the data which you can get in terms of radiance. You can see by plotting more of them, the condition, the light illumination condition were rather stable in these 5 minutes. And we can exploit also the reflected radiance of the same spectrometer in the same hour. The structure is identical, just we have now the reflected radiance, which we can, for example, overplot in this one. Zooming in again. And here you can see that the incoming radiance, of course, is way higher than the reflected radiance, because the reflected radiance is mostly absorbed by the vegetation. By making the ratio of the two, basically what you get is the reflectance, which is a normalization. So it's no, okay, here I have some invalid values, but I can show you maybe the reflectance of the fluo spectrometer, which looks like that. In this case, the spectral range is different because it's only going from 650 to 800 approximately. And here what you can clearly see in this case is this peak, and this peak is the infilling of fluorescence, which is clearly visible. This is the other spectrometer with a higher resolution. In the case of the full range, you cannot see it as good as this one, and this is why with the flux we need to retrieve fluorescence, we need the second spectrometer. And together with this data, so the radiance, one of the output, which now also has finished in the other folder, is this all index file, which is a sort of summary file containing synthetic information starting from the day of the year, the time in UTC, the solar zenith angle, so basically the elevation of the sun, the coordinates, so the location of the instrument, the different temperature and humidity values collected inside the instrument, which is useful to track, for example, humidity. In some cases, we had experience with the flooded instrument, and this was clearly visible also from remote. You could see that there was something going wrong, so maintenance was required. And some of the specific or synthetic information regarding incoming radiance. This is, for example, giving you an idea of the change of the incoming radiance, so the sun radiance, and you can see the first day was pretty cloud-free, whilst the second one, there was a lot of cloud overpass, which was causing these up and down and these spikes and outliers in the incoming radiance. The same for the reflected radiance. This is stability, is a good parameter for filtering the data, since it's the ratio in between the first and the second white reference within the same measurement cycle, which means that is in percentage, and usually we accept, we recommend to accept data with less than 1% variation in between the white, which means in the same, consider the maximum time that one measurement can take in terms of incoming, reflected, and incoming is about 12 seconds. So meaning that in this 12 seconds, the illumination condition should be stable at least at 1%. So pretty conservative one, but probably is a good threshold because of the complexity of the retrieval of fluorescence. Then other columns refer to the saturation value. Imagine that the instrument is optimizing the integration time, so the time the spectrometer remains open for during a cloud overpass. Then the clouds moves away, but the integration time still is rather high. So when the sun is reaching the surface, the integration time is too long, and this could create some saturation in the data. If the data is saturated, it cannot be used, and this is a Boolean factor that with 0 and 1, you can see if it was saturated or not for filtering the data as well. And
so, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. How much time it takes for optimizing the instrument during the cloud cover?
So we set a maximum. So this depends a bit on the spectrometer, but if we are talking to the one which is taking longer, which is the fluo range spectrometer, we set a maximum integration time of 4 seconds. So means that it optimizes, but if the optimization time which is found is higher than 4 seconds, in any case, we kept this 4 seconds. Otherwise, it's probably too risky because the environmental condition, the light condition can change, and then you risk to lose the data. And so let's say that the maximum time you can get to get the measurement in this case is 12 seconds, but then you need to consider that you need to collect also the dark current of the other channel. So in total, I would say is 4 times 5, 20 seconds plus maybe 5-6 seconds of optimization, the maximum.
So that means you are getting reliable measurements every after 30 seconds?
Yeah, 30 seconds could be a good approximation. Then the other, first, there is one spectrometer operating, then the following is the other spectrometer. So the full range spectrometer is much faster. So in total, it can be that there are even 2-3 measurements in a minute. But this, for example, was not the case in Svalbard, where it's usually cloudy. The sun is not as strong as in other places, but yeah. Yes, consider that at least one measurement every minute, even faster depending on the condition, the illumination condition.
Thank you.
Okay, then here we have other parameter which I can skip maybe for now for filtering, and then you have the fluorescence retrieval. In this case is the fluorescence at the A band, then also the B band, and so the red and far red fluorescence. And here you can see, for example, this behavior. As you can see in the second day, when the clouds were there, there is a drop in fluorescence, and this is normal because, let's say, the main drivers for fluorescence are PAR and chlorophyll content. If the PAR is changing, of course, also the fluorescence emission is changing. This is why also is useful to normalize the fluorescence and to get sort of apparent yield by normalizing it for the photosynthetically active radiation, which is also an output here. In this case, these are the data collected by the second spectrometer, so the full range, and the PAR is calculated as an integral between 400 and 700 for the incoming radiation and the reflected radiance. Also, there is an estimate of the APAR. This is a formulation implemented in the code which follow a semi-empirical approach presented, published it in 96. And also here you have, for the second spectrometer, also the parameter of the stability condition during the measurement. And then again, all the other, the same parameter for data filtering, and finally the vegetation indices and that were specified in the index file. And here, for example, plotting the NDVI, and you can see that in between the 2 days, the NDVI suffer less the change of illumination condition. Also, these are the data without any kind of filter. It can be that after the filtering, this noise around here is less pronounced. Then maybe moving to the data filtering. In this case, we can specify. So I was for the data filtering, you need to pass as an input the all index file, which I just show you. And in this case, I already have prepared the all index files for all the 3 years. So I'm just selecting this folder containing all of them. And if I name it like Svalbard, and here you can see that this is the location of the flocks taken by the all index file. So in the Svalbard, and here what you can do is filtering this all index summary file according to specific parameter. In this case, for example, the solar zenith angle, which means the position of the sun. In this case, since we are in Svalbard, maybe 75 is too conservative. We can put 90. So basically, we are just filtering out the data collected when the sun is below the horizon. Then we can define here the stability threshold. In this case, it's already the recommended one. So 1 for the fluor range spectrometer, 5 for the full range. And then, yeah, these are the dynamic range for the filtering. But yeah, so if I'm launching this, yeah, this is taking a while because we are filtering 3 years of data, and already I have here the filtered time series, which I can open, for example, here. Is also taking a while because if we go back to the, yeah, we are talking about 100 kilobytes. So already a lot for Excel, but if we are plotting the incoming radiance, for example, we can see this is the incoming radiance of the 3 years of data. And we have like 148,000 measurements collected. This is the filtered time series. And yeah, here is a bit too complex to go now into the same day of measurement. But what we can also do is the data aggregation. In this case, what we need to select is the filtered time series, which we just seen. So here the fluo and the full file. Then here you can select the interval you want to use for the aggregation. In this case, like the standard one is 30 minutes because it's thought in the direction of going for a comparison with the eddy covariance tower, so the GPP fluxes. But you can also specify if, for example, you want to compare with other pyranometer or whatever other variables which has a different time interval, you can also select it. And then the daily aggregation that you can specify. For example, if you want to have a daily value, and you can specify, in this case, it is calculating an average in between the hours that you specify here. So for example, here is 10 to, so it's midday value, which usually is the one less affected by this bidirectional effect I was mentioning before. And then in case you can also specify to aggregate not on an interval refer to the time interval, but referring to the solar zenith angle position. So basically, if you want to have always the same data collected with the same sun angle position, again, in order to reduce the effect of possible directional effects, you can also specify here this aggregation. In this case, I can start the aggregation. Again, it's taking a while. And in this folder, I was already preparing. This is the one coming out from the filtering. In this one is the results of the aggregation already. I was testing different time aggregation for the daily aggregation, in this case in between 9 and 16 or in between 10 and 1 p.m. If we go to the all index aggregated in every 30 minutes, we can look at the NDY, for example. And if we still have opened this one, we can also overplot and see the effect of the aggregation. No. So. Yeah, here it's not visible because I made the other way around the overplot, but already from the size of the files, you can see that we moved from 98K to 3K. This is because the measurements are aggregated every 30 minutes, and then even less if we are moving to the daily aggregation. So for example, here, if we plot here these final results, you can see that we are reducing significantly the number. And this is maybe then easier to compare, for example, with the temperature data or the meteorological data we were getting from the same site to investigate the possible reason why the biomass was higher the second year respect to the first and the last one. And yeah, and here when it's finished, it also show this graph to give a better overview of the results. And here you can see that, for example, the fluorescence, which in some cases was registered negative, which makes no sense because physically cannot be negative. In this case, after the cleaning, the filtering, and the data aggregation, is going back to reasonable results and values. And yeah, I think this is more or less everything I was preparing to show you. So I do not know if you have a specific question regarding to that, or if you need some clarification about some of the steps in the processing or whatever. I'm happy to reply.